Good evening, everybody. Once again, welcome to another discussion on what is happening in Israel, Gaza, Lebanon, beyond it to Iran. And thank you for joining at a time when we have so many other things happening. Television channels are buzzing with what is happening between India and Canada. Well, we have got very distinguished panelists. They don't need any introduction. You see them on television channels, you read their columns, you read their books, and they are enlightening all of us all the time.
Hello.
MJ, hello, hi,
Hi.
Meera, glad you are here.
Yeah.
So I'm just beginning at the very beginning. At Bing Crosby says, let us begin at the beginning. So
Yeah.
introduction of MJ didn't need an introduction. He's a pioneer editor. I don't know how many publications he's introduced, from Telegraph to Sunday to ASNEA to Sunday Guardian, and he's MP Lok Sabha, MP Raj Sabha, member MOSEA, and also prolific writer. I've been reading his books since I joined the service, and starting from the Kashmir, Behind the Veil, India, the Seas Within, Nehru, The Making of India, The Shade of Shore, Jihad, Conflict Between Islam and Christianity. And the most recently, he wrote this book, which I attended his launch at the Nehru Memorial. It's called our Prime Minister's Sangrahalaya, Gandhi, A Life in Three Campaigns. So he knows the area. He has crisscrossed Gulf countries, and I'm sure he will really enlighten us in what's going on behind the headlines. Then we have Mr. Meera Shankar. Again, you see her all the time, various channels giving her views on what is happening in USA, what is happening in the country where USA is playing a major role. She was ambassador to Germany and then USA, and then she was USA earlier also as Minister Economic, and she was longest stint in the Prime Minister's office during Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi. And she is very articulate in her views, whether you agree with her or not, but she certainly expressed them very fearlessly and very logically, restfully, and correctly. Now we have Professor Chintamani Mahapatra. He has been faculty SIS at Jawaharlal University from 1999 to 2022. He was a professor of American, Canadian, Latin American Studies. He was also rector of university. Professor Mahapatra, after retirement, set up what you call the founder chairman of Kalinga Institute of Indo-Pacific Studies. He has been in support of I5, and he has been participating in discussions for more than 10, 12 years. He has authored many books. He has co-authored several books and contributed articles to 30 books. His two books of recent interest are The U.S. Approach to Islam, Post 9/11, Rise of the Indo-Pacific Prospects, Dimensions and Challenges. He held the Tagore Chair in Iran University in China, and the editor of the Foreign Affairs Journal of AID, Association of Indian Diplomat, and also I think IDSA. He has visited many presidential libraries in USA to collect material. Dr. Awwad is known face in India. You see him all the time. He's claimed on, I'm quoting what he has said in X, that he's an independent international journalist and political analyst. And he is also, I think, the distinguished fellow at Kalotama Foundation for West Asia. He knows the area. He is from the country where I spent 4 years in early 80s when not Bashar Assad, his father was the president. So gentlemen, we will, normally I request the senior most person at the end, but for a change this time, I am going to request Sri MJ Akbar to initiate the discussion. I have lined up quite a few questions for him. I jumbled them. He can all address them in whatever order he feels like, and he can add whatever he wants like. So let me ask very bluntly, what's going on? Is it a proxy war between Iran and USA? And is Israel's ultimate game is the change of regime in Tehran with tacit approval or support of USA? The second is President Biden has been addressing every day that he is given various deadlines of ceasefire in Gaza, ceasefire Lebanon. At the same time, he continues sending all the weapons and ammunition to Israel. So one doesn't know what to make out all these deadlines and all the rhetoric about the ceasefire. And next is, what about all these Arab leaders? Why are they so silent? Are they afraid of Israel, or they're afraid of USA, or they're afraid of both of them? And lastly, the UN and all the international community has become helpless bystander. What's going on? I mean, 44,000 people killed in Gaza, more than 20,000 are children. I was reading more than 15,000 children left with one leg. And then now, even the US administration, ambassador UN was referring to virtual starvation conditions and food being not allowed to go inside. So I don't know how realistically do you really see any light at the end of tunnel? Over to you, MJ. Yeah, unmute yourself. Yes.
The only problematic word that you have used is proxy. What is proxy about this war? It's a very direct confrontation between America, because without America, I don't think Israel has the fighting capacity or the sustainability to continue a war beyond a point. And of course, Iran. And Iran, without the kind of economic wealth or indeed the international support that the United States commands. This is, in a very real sense, an asymmetrical war, because there's air superiority on one side, there is tank superiority on the other side. And the other side, basically, you're fighting a guerrilla war from the desert and from very barren locations. So every war produces its own dynamics, and this one will do. To get down to the latest aspects of this war, which may have been missed, because in the thunder and lightning of actual fighting, we sometimes miss what is happening on the sidelines. But very important things have happened on the sidelines. For the first time, at least since this war has begun, Jordan has conveyed that it will not allow its airspace to be used by Israel in an attack on Iran. And I think the Iranian diplomacy, after the very successful Iranian strike of missiles, which actually pierced the Iron Dome and surprised, if not shocked, I think both Israel and America. After that, the Iranians have put in a phase of very intense diplomacy in the Gulf, and that is producing results. I think the message that they have conveyed, that if you allow Israeli planes to use your airspace to attack Iran, then we will consider it a hostile action and with repercussions. In the last, when the Iranians fired those missiles at Israel, I'm sure all of you know that the Jordanians, for example, actually tried to stop those missiles. So the Gulf countries have not been as non-partisan as you might think. But I think that is changing, both under the pressure of public opinion and because there is a growing perception that what might be called the acceptable limits of reaction have been far exceeded. Qatar, for example, has just made a statement that there has been no engagement whatsoever for the last few weeks, months, perhaps. Very significantly, Egypt has changed its chief of security, and that too, individuals matter, and that too, there are reasons. I think there are very interesting developments taking place. It is famously said that Netanyahu or Israel is fighting on 7 fronts. But I think there is an 8th front which the Israeli Prime Minister is fighting on, then that is his own internal politics, because that has certainly had an impact on some of his decision making. But there is a 9th front, very interesting. The European countries now are taking a much more active interest and taking a position which they have very rarely done. Spain, for example, has asked for a trade boycott of Israel. France, Macron, I am still surprised at the statement made by France, where he has basically now actually stopped any weapons transactions with Israel de facto, has also told Israel that the nation is a creation of the United Nations with all the implications that that very heavily loaded statement made. But I think most significantly, Prime Minister Meloni of Italy has not only decided to go to Lebanon, but has also made a statement that it is time to bring President Assad of Syria out of the cold. Now, these are some of the ramifications that are taking place, which are not being fully recognized. As far as President Biden is concerned and America is concerned, when America gives a free hand, it only means that the White House doesn't have a policy. And I think that is quite obvious. They haven't thought this through. I have not heard a single interesting idea or option or diplomatic initiative emerge from the White House, which is very, very strange for a country that commands as much power in every sense as Americans do, particularly in that region. Its only policy has been to provide, semantics on one level and arms to Israel on the other. But that is not a policy that leads to any kind of a solution to the problem. I think what we are seeing is a White House which has lost its way, or as I said once, it is going from nowhere to nowhere. The Arab response was the silence of the lambs, as you mentioned before. But I think public pressure is finally getting through, and the silence is not going to be acceptable beyond a point to the Arab populations. And even if some of the governments live above public opinion, they can't be completely immune or indifferent to their own public opinion. The war itself, the way it's going, invites a very, very big question, which is, can destruction for the sake of destruction ever lead to any kind of solution? And along with this, we have to ask a question which we cannot avoid, irrespective of which side of the fence you might prefer to be, or which partisan inclination you might hold. How do you deal with terrorism? 1 year ago, in October, 7th October, there was a very serious terrorist attack. The attack was on Israel. It was done by Hamas, and the consequences. Now, I'm often reminded that if revenge is your only option, then our great genius Mahatma Gandhi always comes to mind, and there is no better time than today to remember what he said. An eye for an eye will leave everyone blind. And if an eye for an eye is going to be the story of this war, then it will leave both sides blind, and that's not something that we wish for. But I want to, before I end, actually remind all of us, and as well as whatever audience we have, that India has shown a way to dealing with, of answering this question as to how do you deal with question. In the 21st century, we have had 3 prime ministers. Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Dr. Manmohan Singh, and Narendra Modi. All 3 have faced very serious terrorist attacks, all sourced from Pakistan. And let's not, sort of run around the bush. That is where it was sourced from, that we know it happened. Vajpayee ji had to face Kargil and then the parliamentary attack. Dr. Manmohan Singh, despite all his very sincere efforts towards better relations with Pakistan, ended up with Bombay, which could be more horrific. And of course, Prime Minister Modi invited Nawaz Sharif. Prime Minister Modi went to Pakistan for on the guise of going to a wedding, did his best and had to face Pulwama. I think the answer that India has found on all 3 prime ministers is the doctrine of the calibrated response. that you have to measure the response so that the response doesn't become a problem. Each time we have taken action, perhaps some of it was controversial. I personally did not feel that Dr. Manmohan Singh was as aggressive as he could have been. But that is, I think, less the point. Then the more important point is that each prime minister, in his own judgment, had a response, but ensured, despite the human tendency towards aggression, that it was not in the national interest to go beyond a point. And that is why I think today India stays in such good standing. And the country which sponsored the terrorism, which gave sanctuary today, is actually facing the counterproductive effects of the policies that it has inspired. I think, Surendra, you're trying very hard to interrupt me. I'll stop here and let you carry on.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let us continue the same thrust, Dr. Awwad. Is your similar question, is the muted or no reaction of Arab leaders, especially in the Gulf leaders, against Israel's indiscriminate attack in Gaza and Lebanon reflect the deep Sunni-Shia divide, or there is an undercurrent of a degree of relief among the Arab leaders that the Hamas, the Hezbollahs, and Palestinians are going to weaken to a great extent, which they don't really oppose? My second question is that Hamas terrorist attack was terrorist attack, but it really brought the Palestinian two-state question on the forefront. But after Israelis went to Lebanon, and now all devastation there, and then this issue of Iran-Israel, that question Palestinian issue is getting derailed, it's getting pushed in the backyard. So do you think Netanyahu is virtually killed this whole issue, at least for near future? My next question is, if there is open airstrike between Iran and Israel, with the Gulf countries side with Iran, or they will remain neutral? And last is, India has relations with all these countries, with Israel, Palestine, Gulf, Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt, every country. Do you think India has a role to try to have some kind of mediation, some kind of peace plan? Over to you. Your unmuting is a...
Unmuting, yeah.
Okay,
thank you very much, Ambassador Surendra, and thank you for putting me with such a distinguished panelist, which I feel proud and honored to have them all in one platform. I think I need to touch 2-3 points before I answer your questions. I'd like to give always a brief history, which is very interesting for the people to understand that this conflict did not start on the 7th of October. We know that the moment the creation of Israel started with Herzl in the first meeting he created in Basel in 1899, where he wanted to create the state of Israel and the first Zionist movement. That was where the time they were planning to have a state inside Palestine and a land without people, but actually it was full of people, we all know. And the second part was to make it a Jewish state. Though he was an atheist, he never believed in any religion, but he still took the ideology of an Israeli promised land and he established it. And if you look at the first Zionist conference, you will understand all the points he had put it across, it has been implemented stage by stage till date. So therefore, to create a state of Israel, of independent Israel as a Jew state. Secondly, to make Israel the dominant state in the Arab world or in the West Asia or Middle East. And thirdly, is to have the control on the water and the lands. And if we look at these three combinations, we understand the current conflict. Because I do not see the 7th of October as a changing point. It might be a culmination of the atrocities that the Palestinians have been subjected. And if we know that during the first beginning of 2023, more than 22,000 Palestinians were killed in West Bank, in Gaza. It has been a total killing, but nobody was counting the Palestinian death till the Israeli death started. So the world woke up only when an Israeli get killed. And that's when the terrorism has come to the picture. We know all these things we have been witnessing. We have been seeing all this development in our region for years. So we lived all the horror of expansion, of aggressions, of settlements in the Middle East and in Israel. So it's not a fight between Hamas and Israel or Hamas and Hezbollah. The fight started between Israel and the Arabs, where Israel have been created in 1948. And then they have occupied 1967, the Syrian Golan, where they have 34% of their water supply. And even Menachem Begin, the defense minister, wrote in his autobiography, we provoked the Syrian because we needed the water of the Golan. And that's understood. It's in their book, not my book. Secondly, the same thing with the Sheba farm. Sheba farm was even in Herzl documentary, and it is documented also 1915 and 1905, when he wrote to the Turkish Empire, those days where we were under the Turkish occupation. I call it occupation. I don't call it that extension of Islamic word, because the Khalifa factor, Erdogan is carrying only the rhetoric currently of an Islamic slogan. Thirdly, and more importantly, they kept the Sheba farm at the occupation. Over the years, they made the fighting from a multilateral Arab fighting into a bilateral between Israel and Palestine. After Camp David, they started with the Oslo agreement, then Arafah agreement with Jordan, and all the agreements have been failed because Israel now exposed and already, I think the war on Gaza have already exposed the real intention behind this fight. It's never been Hamas. We can see the amount of killing. You put these people in the steering pot. You tell them, go one safe area, come back to the second area. You keep on bombarding, you keep on killing. So the idea is to reoccupy the whole of Palestine. There is no question of two-state solution. And you remember, it was Benjamin Netanyahu, the Polish origin fellow, who has been in 1995 when he fought against 1992 agreement, where he has torn this Oslo agreement and he threw it in the dustbin. And one of his activists killed the Israeli prime minister because he signed the agreement. So we all know that he said no two-state solution. So he wrote his book in 1996. He explained his vision, and his vision was totally of a new Middle East order, which we call it the new Middle East disorder. And he had the full support of the United States. I agree with Mr. Akbar when he said we talk of proxies, but if I wanted to call the Iranian and the arch of resistance extended from Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Yemen as proxies, I would say that Israel is the proxy of the United States. So let's put it in that perspective to understand the real conflict. We are not fighting Israel. Israel might have lost with the attack by the Palestinian, and also with the north part of Israel is under the fire because of the exchange with the Hezbollah fighting in that part of the world. But expansion of the war to drag Iran into the fighting, I think that was the prime objective of Netanyahu, to make it a regional war and bring Iran to face the United States. So therefore, I believe Israel started as a colonial settlement enclave in the heart of the Arab world and continue to be so till date because they denied the Palestinian right of existence or two-state solution. Iran took a full advantage of the Arab vacuum. The unfortunate part that the Arab have given a vacuum where the Iranians stepped in and they were feeling that they will be the champion of the Islamic cause because there is a religious angle to the fight where Al-Aqsa Mosque and Deja, because Israelis are now openly talking of building the Solomon Temple and they want to tear the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and then they will build up the dream of a great Israel. And they have been talking and showing, even Smotrich, the finance minister of Israel in 2016, he said it, and it is openly now, everybody is running it in the social media, that he said the greater Israel is from Euphrates to Nile. That includes Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, and Sinai Peninsula, and 1/3 of Saudi Arabia. That's the plan. So it's not we are putting the plan. So therefore, Ben Gurion, when he said that the Arab want to throw us to the sea, unfortunately, and like fool, we follow it and we adopt it. And they were saying the Arab said it. We know that he said it himself, that we want to throw the Israelis or the Jews to the sea. So therefore, we need to distinguish between two issues here. Is the Zionist movement that led to this current anarchy in the West Asia? Jewish acknowledge that even their Chacham, even their rabbis acknowledge that they never had more peaceful part in their history, except under the Islamic rule. So therefore, because we consider them as a Semite, we consider them also as a religious of God. So therefore, we never had a problem. They never had a problem. The problem started only when the Arabs start feeling that the American and with the Arab Spring, we noticed that most of the Arab countries went behind. Even the former Prime Minister of Qatar said we spent $137 billion to double the Syrian government, because that was the American behest, because they were behaving under the American. Even Joe Biden said it himself when he was the vice president, that we created this Daesh only and the force to defeat Syria, the ISIS. The Americans said it, it wasn't me. So terrorism has been used ever since the culture of jihadists in Afghanistan. They started it in Iraq and in Syria and continue on the same panel. After all this happening, Iran have supported the Shia, supported the Sunni. So the Shia of Iraq, of Lebanon, the Sunni of Hamas is fully Sunnis, and the Jihad al-Islami Sunni. So therefore, the question of Shia-Sunni divide did not come to the picture, because that is the ultimatum goal of the vested interest nation, to make sure that the fight will be one day between Shia and Sunni in the Arab world. And that is what they're planning for. So Iran have taken a full advantage. There is a project, there is an Iranian project, there is an Israeli project, but unfortunately, there is no Arab project. We have lost the comprehensive framework of a political solution. Because we never had a united position to defend our cause. We always only have a slogan, a rhetoric of the Palestinian. And some of the Arab countries also realized that because of the development in the region, because of Israel trying to bring it into normalization of Abraham Accord and all, they distanced themselves from the Palestinian cause. So Hamas took the full advantage of this. And I think that is why there was some resentment among the Arab countries, especially in the Gulf country, because Hamas was in the picture. Had it not been Hamas, it would have been different, because the winning of Hamas means the winning of the Iranian and Hamas together, and the Islamic movement of the Muslim Brotherhood organization will topple all these governments and the Sheikhdom of the Arab countries. Therefore, that was one of the issues. The second part, which is more dangerous to us now, will they do if Israel attack Iran, and which is they are planning already. And the plan, believe me, it's not only from the Israeli side. It is the German, it's the French, it's the British, and the United States. They are already present in the region. And what they are planning, if one of the ugly scenario is to use a tactical nuclear bomb on Iran, let 1 million die, and there's no question of a multipolar war. That's one of the reasons why they are going to bombard. If Iran retaliate and attack Israel, Israel is the only nuclear state in the Arab world. And I will end my talk here by saying, it's not that Iranian will suffer, it is the people in the region. If the Dimona nuclear site of Israel got attacked, and all the radiation will kill all of us. So therefore, I think there was a sense among the Arab countries, 57 Arab nations and the Islamic nation and the General Assembly. They submitted a letter to the Israeli calling for a peace deal and a strategic peace deal with Israel, provided Israel give its border. But they refused, because they don't recognize their border. So I think that toxic mixture of an extreme right wing using the might of the United States and some of the fake morphed religious book, which they suits themselves, I think that toxic mixture is very dangerous for the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Awwad. You have really painted quite doomsday scenario. I hope it doesn't come true. The nuclear weapon may not be used. Let's hope at least keep the hope alive. Now, Professor Mahapatra, you have spent your entire life studying Americans. You have gone to President's Library, so give some insight, American mind. Now, tell me, Netanyahu has chosen the right place. You have president who is lame duck, and 2 president candidates who can't afford to say anything against Israel because the election is hardly 30 days left. So he has given almost like carte blanche, do whatever he can do remaining 30 days and destroy as much as he can. But as I have written my articles, there is no military solution problem. He can kill as many Hamas and Hezbollah, but he will never be able to destroy the cause which they are espousing and they're propagating. So I don't know, he's perhaps on the wrong path. Now tell me why US is following what he is following. Because if you go to I was reading that President Biden says can the US really play any honest broker? Now, nobody believes he himself is 38, but even when he has full flesh 4 years ahead of him, he has been one of the most vocal supporter of Israel. And not now, even from his senator days, and he has been all his life, he has been a supporter. So we can't expect anything very even-handed from him. But what is the solution in coming months and weeks? How to calm down the situation? How to bring these warring factions and parties to some sort of dialogue across the table? Or do you think it is totally not possible now? And then also, I think I want somebody to comment, is this plan to change the regime in Tehran? After all, Netanyahu openly on television said he urged Iranian people, you will all be free once the regime is gone. So there is some Israeli plan to try whether they will really be able to implement it or not. I don't know. Over to you. Yeah, unmute you. Yes.
Namaste, good evening. Thank you, Ambassador Kumar, for this opportunity yet again to come to your platform and share some of my thoughts. Your questions are very significant, and let me try to answer them to the extent I can. The first question is whether Netanyahu is, making the best of time and doing whatever he is doing. In my view, whether there is a lame duck president or there is a proper timing president or somebody who is about to become the president or just the campaign is going on, whatever may be the situation, the Israeli lobby in the US has always been one of the most powerful influencers in the foreign policy making circles. And that's a fact. In fact, the war is almost more than a year. Joe Biden was not lame duck on 7th of October last year, almost a year. So it does not matter who is in power. No American president can ever ignore the security and stability of Israel as per the American policy that I have been studying for quite some time. Whether this particular war going on in West Asia is going to have an impact on the current election, certainly to some extent. We have seen the position of Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. In one of the swing states are ultimately going to decide who will be the next president. The Arab American population, they live in a large number in a swing state called Michigan. They, of course, do not like the support the present administration is giving to Israel. But Kamala Harris is trying to appear more sympathetic towards the sufferings of the Palestinian people. Will they vote for her? Perhaps. And why? Because the alternative could be worse in their perception. Will the issue be determining factor in the voting behavior? It may not be. There are so many multiple issues, including the economy and immigration and so many issues. So this may not be a determining factor in the outcome of the American election. Now, everybody knows that Israel is the strongest and key strategic ally of the US in this region, and it will remain so. And Netanyahu is certainly taking the US for a ride. This is one of the best times to observe how a little country, how the tail can move the dog. The way Netanyahu is reacting to Joe Biden's sometimes requesting for a ceasefire, sometimes negotiating for a ceasefire, then supplying weapons. And openly Netanyahu is challenging the US position, and even the language is very harsh. We will listen to America, but we will do whatever is good for Israel. That is his statement. So Israel has not acceded to US demands openly, except, of course, the latest one where the US said, the Joe Biden administration said, if you don't take care of these trucks which are taking aid and a different kind of assistance to the people in Gaza, we're not going to supply weapons. Whether the US is going to implement that or not, we don't know. So far, the record is bad. But the Israel has already allowed about 50 trucks to enter Gaza. Netanyahu is doing whatever he's doing to partly remain in power and partly to respond to what Hamas did. It was a big provocation, the worst ever in Israel from the American and the Israeli perspective. But the fact remains that I agree with Mr. Akbar when he said the Europeans are beginning to change the position. Even some of the Arab countries like Jordan is changing the position. The Iranian foreign minister is traveling to different capital in the Arab world, and things may change. That is true. But all these things are rather, in my view, too late. Whether the Arab position, Jordanian position, or even the European position, it is rather late. And Netanyahu is taking advantage of this, that Arabs are not able to do anything. The UN is completely helpless, not doing anything. And the US happens to be the only country. Even the Russians are too busy in Ukraine. The Chinese are over busy in the Taiwan Strait. And who else is there to have some kind of impact on what is going on in the field? Probably you wanted another question about the American image in the region, what's happening. There are two types of images. The image of the United States in the streets of the Arab world and the image of the US in the governing circles of West Asia. They are two different things. Israel's war against Hamas and Hezbollah is regarded by common masses as highly disproportionate, and they perceive the US as largely responsible for it. I think you also said that it was the US which is responsible for whatever is going on, because the US happens to be the only country which can and could restrain Israel, and it has not done so far. So the people in the streets in West Asia don't like the Americans now. There is anti-Americanism. But it is a fact. The US is the largest arms seller in the region, including two important Arab states. It has the 7th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain. It is the largest naval presence in the region. It gives billions of dollars of assistance to Egypt. And of the total US weapons which are sold in the region, 15% of US arms sales go to Saudi Arabia, and Israel shares 3.8%. Iran is not liked by many regional countries. Saudi-Iran rivalry is known to everyone, though there is a little bit of thaw right now. So the image of the US in the streets and the governing circles are two different things. Your last question was about, can the US really play the role of an honest broker and push the process towards a two-state solution, or it isn't really serious about it? Now, I think the US can, if it wants to. There is no second country which can do so if you go by the historical record also. Now, the US was on the side of Egypt even in 1956 Suez crisis, not on the side of Israel for reasons we know very well. The US brokered the Egypt-Israel peace treaty in the 1970s. Indirectly, the US played a role even in the Oslo Accord, which was later not liked by many people, including the Israeli leaders and all. Then how about the Camp David Agreement and the Abraham Accord? Most of them are not workable. But who attempted that? It was the United States of America. Both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party and their administrations have openly supported a two-state solution. I think they will continue to do so. Success or failure, of course, would not depend on the broker alone. The US cannot dictate to the Israelis for the kind of politics that we see in the US and the Israeli lobby, nor can the United States pressure Palestine beyond a point to agree to the terms and conditions of the agreement that they are negotiating. Is the US serious about it? Probably yes, but people can always argue that a superpower always seeks to fish in troubled water, so they're not very serious about it. But let me emphasize, Ambassador Kumar, that the US dependence on oil in this region is several times less than that of their partners in the NATO countries, and than that of their main rival, that is China. It is this particular situation which is making America the dominant actor in the region. They are not dependent on the oil of this region. They buy about 10% or so, but their rivals as well as the allies are dependent, and they are the ones who are calling the shots in global geopolitics and geoeconomy. It is really surprising that the oil market is still very stable in spite of two wars ravaging on. We don't know why. Maybe somebody will throw some light on this, but the US will continue to be the sole dominant actor in the region, whether we like it, we don't like it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Meera, everybody is mentioning US. US is the dragon or the bull in the room. Now, with your years in USA, you should show some right. Let me ask some blunt questions. Now, Biden might have very reluctantly ended his bid to seek re-election. You are very emphatic. I'm the man to beat Trump. And he finally had to give in. But his decisions in the last 1 month, many of Kamala Harris' campaign also feeling that this might really harm her. I mean, her campaign, her dream of entering White House can be really adversely affected by what he is doing. And then this whole issue about Iran firing supersonic missiles on Israel. They all claim that many of them intercepted by USA, intercepted by Jordan, intercepted by some others. Even the UK claim they entered. But some of the European papers and London newspapers, they have claimed that many of these, at least 50% missiles, did really get through. They were able to hit target. We don't know how much damage was caused, but there is certainly a degree of distrust about Israeli claim that nothing happened, nobody was damaged by that. Now, we also claim, I think you must have seen just yesterday, day before, Harris appeared on Fox television, which basically Trump's area, and very tough questions. But she said certain things. My presidency would not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency. And like every new president that comes to office, I will bring my life experience and professional experience. I represent a new generation of leadership. Do you think if Kamala Harris really enters the White House, we can see a totally different approach to this whole conflict? She might be more receptive, at least giving more sympathetic ear to what is going on, Gaza, plight of Palestinians, and trying to slowly work towards going backward to have some kind of dialogue restarted. Though whether it will happen or not, I don't know. And lastly, all claims of Netanyahu, how many thousand they've killed, how many tunnels they have blasted, how many weapons they've destroyed. Initial claim was that he will obliterate Hamas from earth. That hasn't happened. And Hezbollah also, they've claimed the leaders and entered tunnels. And I'm sure if the war is stopped tomorrow or day after, you will still find that 1,000 Hezbollah supporters are there. So do you think they can really kill these terrorists, as they call their menace, from the earth? Or they have to sooner or later come back to realization that there is no military solution, which I mean, right? They have to go back and embrace 242, go back to Oslo Accord, and go back to what Arafat and Rabin was trying to do. That was flawed, may not be flawed. Fact remains, they really gave a hope. Now there's nothing to give hope. Over to you. You can add any of your comment on what Mr. M.J. Akbar has said or others have said, and give little more perspective, American attitude. Unmute yourself. Unmute you. These all mics are very strong to get unmuted. Press very hard.
No, you hit on the screen, then you will be able, not on your picture, hit on the screen.
There is an image of mic, but I have to simply Can you call in the picture?
There is a mic icon, so you have to press there.
Yeah, red color mic is there. Call your good husband. Where is he? We can't unmute from our side, can I? Let me see. I think perhaps Meera.
Okay, now it's done.
Okay.
So, firstly, I would like to make the point that Israel has not been very strategically smart in terms of the kind of response that it has made to the terrorist attack of October 7th. If you look at the situation in West Asia, it was moving to Israel's advantage with the Abraham Accords. They already had peace agreements with Egypt and Jordan. And under the Abraham Accords, they had agreements with the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, maybe one other country, and they were moving to actually establish relations with Saudi Arabia, with many initial steps having been taken. While there was a degree of surprise in the Hamas attack, and the attack was on a scale which obviously led to quite a bit of destruction and killing in Israel, and there was sympathy for Israel over this, the response has been disproportionate and almost aimed at a population rather than at the terrorist group responsible for it. Now, if you look at Israel's policies also in the past, it has been to grow Hamas in Gaza as a way to avoid a two-state solution by fostering divisions between Hamas and Fatah. And therefore, it has been a short-sighted policy. We are again seeing this kind of short-sightedness on the part of Israel, because the situation which had improved to their advantage will now not be so conducive to them. They've taken advantage of two aspects, I think. One is that Arab governments in the region fear radicalization from Palestinians much more than they fear Israel. The second is the regional rivalry with Iran, which has enabled Israel to find acceptance among the Arab states who feel that Israel can help them in their regional game of supremacy vis-a-vis Iran, or at least to handle the threat that they perceive that they face from Iran. The situation, of course, has been complicated because the US is in election season, and the Democratic Party has groups within the Democratic Party which oppose the policies, the progressives oppose the Biden administration's policies, but the consensus in the US for full support to Israel is so strong that I doubt that any president would have been able to really apply pressure on Israel in the face of what was seen as a major terrorist attack on them. The US has tried ineffectively to broker a ceasefire, which would have had elements of, a halt in the conflict, exchange of some number of hostages, extension of the ceasefire, exchange of the remaining withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza, and then extension of the ceasefire into a more permanent cessation of hostilities. But the Israelis have not accepted it. And at each time that there was a possibility of an agreement, they have taken specific action to thwart it. So first you had the killing of that Hamas leader in Iran, Haniyeh. And then secondly, when the US was close to brokering a ceasefire with Hezbollah in Lebanon, because Hezbollah had accepted that there could be a ceasefire, again, Israel had the assassination of Nasrallah, the leader of the Hezbollah, and other leaders as well, in a major surprise attack through pager explosions, and then followed by bombing and outright deployment of forces in Lebanon. The US has now stopped trying to even put together discussions on a ceasefire. They are focused at the moment, I think, on limiting the conflict, the potential conflict between Israel and Iran. If you see what Iran said, the first time they launched their missiles against Israel, they had actually conveyed to the US and to others that they were going to launch with the intention of having a limited action and not leading to a spiraling conflict. With the assassination of Haniyeh, they had still shown restraint for a period of time because the US had assured them that a ceasefire with Hezbollah was in the offing. And that didn't work out. Now the Iranians have said that because of the assassination of Haniyeh and of Nasrallah and other leaders, they are being forced to respond, but they are not responding in heat. They have carefully considered their options, and they have taken the decision to use their missiles, and they've used low-level missiles. The Israelis have said they are going to respond. In what way is the question, because the way they respond will determine whether this conflict spirals and becomes a much broader war, or it can be contained in terms of at least this tit-for-tat action between Iran and Israel. The US has said that Israel has given them some assurance that they will not target Iran's nuclear facilities, to which the US has said they would not support Israeli action against Iran's nuclear facilities, and also oil installations, because damage to oil installations would hit the global economy. But they said, also expressing their helplessness, that Israel has not abided by the assurances that have been conveyed in the past. And Netanyahu has clarified that Israel listens to the US, but it will act in its own best interest. So even the Americans don't know what the Israelis are likely to do. Clearly, the situation is very fraught, and more fraught because of the fact that there is a presidential election in the US. While Biden has been supporting Israel, but pressing for a ceasefire, eventual withdrawal of Israeli troops, exchange of hostages, and a two-state solution, feebly and ineffectively, Trump has basically said, well, it's the nuclear facilities that they should attack, because that's where the threat arises. So the problem of America being listened to at this stage is that Trump is conveying signals that he will give Israel a completely free hand. And therefore, Netanyahu will play for time till the elections are over. How he's going to respond to Iran remains to be seen. In America, amongst youth on college campuses, amongst progressives in the Democratic Party, and amongst Arab Americans, the Biden stance is very unpopular and could impact Kamala Harris's ability to get out the vote. If Arab Americans in Michigan decide to boycott the election by not voting, they won't vote for Trump, but they can boycott the election by not voting. It would impact Kamala Harris's chance in a key swing state, in a situation where It's a very, very tight race. It's almost 50-50. Nobody knows which way it's going to swing. Though in recent weeks, the advantage has moved narrowly in favor of Trump in some of the states. As far as Trump is concerned, his policy, because he's also dependent on the Christian right in the US, and they support Israel to the core. You know, the second coming is at hand, and that is going to be the promised land, and so on. So his Christian conservative base, apart from the Jewish lobby, reinforces his complete tilt towards Israel as far as policy in the Middle East is concerned. And I don't agree that the Republicans under Trump would try to push for a two-state solution. I think he will give Israel a free hand to do what it wants. So we are in a very, very difficult situation. It puts paid to any sense of international fair play, rule of law, rules of war, rules of conflict, and exposes the moral hypocrisy of the West. I think they are very vocal on Ukraine, where far less damage has been done, and completely silent on what is happening in Gaza or in Lebanon. So I think we have to wait and watch how Israel responds to Iran and whether this conflict can be contained or it spirals irretrievably into a broader regional conflict.
Okay, thank you, Meera. We have listened to 4 distinguished panelists. We have given very insightful views. Now I will request you all in 2 minutes to give it what is, even in spite of all the depressing news, what is the way forward, and is there anything which India can do? I will give each one of you 2 minutes, starting with Dr. Awwad, then Professor Mahapatra, then Meera, ending with Mr. M.J. Akbar. Okay, Dr. Awwad, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Ambassador Surendra. I don't think anybody can play any role, because I think the hypocrisy in the world have already exposed that sort of closing eyes what's happening in Palestine and in Lebanon, the amount of killing, and any country want to step in, they're only a good wisher. It's only in the hand of the United States and Netanyahu, because Netanyahu made it very clear for the American administration that he will not stop this war. There is no exchange of prisoners. He will continue, he will expand, he will include Syria, Lebanon, and he will go even up to Iran. So regional war will continue, will guarantee his continuity in office. And I think after he killed the Hezbollah leader, Hassan Nasrallah, his popularity increased. But I think the equation has tilted again with their amount of retaliation against the Israeli attack. So I think any sort of flaring up from the Iranian side into this would, after, if Israel attack Iran, retaliatory attack will make it more messy. It will be more of a regional war where India will be the most affected country, since it is the #1 stakeholder in terms of food security, in terms of oil security, in terms of diaspora security. And I think India only can be proactive in talking to all the stakeholders. But the ball is in the American court, and Netanyahu will continue. Because look at the messages we are getting from both the camps. I fully agree with Ambassador Meera. When she speaks of the, there's no difference between Republican or Democrat. Both of them saying Israel is too small and should expand. What does it mean? That means expand at the cost of the neighbors, which means we are more having aggression, more expansion, more settlement. So the crux of the problem, you need to solve the Palestinian problem if you want peace in this region. Otherwise, we have a perpetual provocation for permanent war.
Okay, thank you. Over to you, Professor Mahapatra. The muting business is difficult.
Sorry about it.
No.
I was saying that the situation is still very grave in the region. I don't see any good news coming in next weeks or months. At the moment, when we're talking and discussing this issue, Putin has issued a statement saying that Israel don't even consider attacking the nuclear installations of Iran. Not talking about nuclear war, don't even consider attacking nuclear installations of Iran. This is a major change from the Russian side. But if I was tracking down the Iranian media, and there are debates going on within Iran, apparently about developing a deterrent, and large number of people in Iran are in favor of going nuclear, although Ayatollah Khamenei has issued a fatwa. Still now there is a rethinking going on in Iran. So in case Iran somehow manages to explode a nuclear device, then this itself is going to change the course of the war in the future. Whether Iran cannot, we don't know, but the debate is going on there. So I don't think the situation is going to be over now. And even before the November election, this is not going to be over in any case. Whoever comes to power in White House, I think Netanyahu will continue to remain in power because his own people, the coalition partners are saying that do whatever you can to finish this guys up. So he's all out and the international community appears to be helpless right now. This is very, very unfortunate. Thank you.
Okay, over to you, Meera, but also say a few words. What about the fate of the remaining hostages? If the whole thing goes on, nobody talks about the remaining hostages, they remain alive or not.
Look, I think this is where a public opinion in Israel, especially from the families of the hostages, has been opposed to Netanyahu's policies because they say, have a ceasefire and return of the hostages should be your priority, rather than putting them as sacrificial lambs in this whole conflict. And there are divisions even between Netanyahu and his defense minister, who is a conservative, saying that, a policy of totally eliminating Hamas is just not a feasible policy. So you have to have a more practical policy. But Netanyahu has not agreed with his defense minister and has overruled him. I think Israel will wait till, not in terms of its response to Iran, but in terms of what else it is going to do. It's not going to change course, at least before the US elections. After the elections, if the US is willing to apply a little more pressure, because as they have done right now, with regard to humanitarian aid being allowed to enter Gaza, where they have been willing to say, we'll stop the weapons if you don't allow the humanitarian aid to go in. And they have even specified the number of trucks that they expect to be allowed in on a daily basis. But it's happened so late in the day because all the efforts for a ceasefire were going along with continuous supply of sophisticated weapons to Israel, the US moving, carrier support groups to the Mediterranean in support of Israel, and now moving its missile defense system. Of course, moving its missile defense system might be a way of, trying to get the Israelis to agree not to target Iran's nuclear facilities, because, with the THAAD deployment, Israeli missiles could be more fully intercepted if they are coming to Israel. But what this will do, as Professor Mahapatra says, is perhaps be the trigger for Iran to actually cross the Rubicon on its nuclear program, because they will see how the US deals with North Korea, which has nuclear weapons, how it dealt with Libya, where after Libya gave up its nuclear option, Gaddafi was assassinated and overthrown. And they will try to address this situation of complete asymmetry, which is a pity because the new government in Iran was showing signs of moderation, of wanting to give priority to economic development and of trying to actually not, convey unending hostility to the West. But I think the situation is now such that perhaps this could be the Rubicon for Iran to cross the nuclear threshold. And that would actually initiate a whole new dynamics in the Middle East.
Okay, over to you, MJ. Also, please comment. I read some report that Russia has been sending quietly some of the system to Tehran to intercept the Israeli missiles.
Well,
Yeah,
I don't believe everything I read, so I would suggest that you read with care. What we can't say for certain, we should comment upon. What we can say is that the South Korean ambassador to Washington has just made a statement asking American permission to work on reprocessing nuclear fuel. I think what we are seeing also, if you remember, maybe 10 days ago, what is alleged to be a minor earthquake in eastern Iran or somewhere in Iran was widely construed by many people to be equivalent to a nuclear test. I don't know what's happening, but I can safely say that if nothing very dramatic, if nuclear facilities are not attacked, then probably the next year you will see Iran going nuclear. And after that, I think the next country on the list would be South Korea. Because the ability of the nations are no longer confident that superpowers will provide the shield that they need to protect their interests or their independence. As usual, every war changes reality. This war, more than most, will create new realities, and the world will have to deal with these new realities and see to what extent they can protect this highly elusive word called security. In principle, what the Prime Minister says, that war is not a solution, is well known, but you have to put common sense in front of human beings and find that human beings run in the opposite direction. The situation that is actually changing very dynamically in West Asia, I don't really call it the Middle East, but in West Asia, is that story is not over. Till then, we can have more conferences like yours.
Thank you. Thank you all for giving your insight.